Revolution, and welcome to our show, everyone. We've got a lot to talk about this morning. We're talking the big victory of Lula in Brazil with a broad left-led coalition. We're going to be talking about the meeting of the International Communist and Workers' Parties that just concluded in Havana, and our very own Rosana Cambron led our delegation there. We're also going to be talking about the affirmative action case before the Supreme Court. Seems like it's on life support. And then finally, mailbag questions and a comment on what's not so new, unfortunately, in today's news. But welcome, Gary. We're very happy to see you.
I'm excited
You've
to
been
be
in
here.
Brazil. Come again?
I said, I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, man. Gary's been living in Brazil for several years. He got married and moved down there with his partner. His gain was our loss. He was formerly in Boston, but now he's been down there for a minute and has been working with the Communist Party there for throughout his stay, and had a hand in the big electoral victory. I imagine you're smiling from ear to ear, Gary, at Lula's victory. Tell us a little bit about it. Did you think that he was going to win in the first round?
We did not, I did not think so because the polls were pretty close. Lula was able to get, he got 48% and he was polling like 46. We were hoping for a victory in the first round.
And there were, how many other candidates were running in that round? Did other parties
12,
draw votes away from Lula?
there were 12 other candidates that were in the race. There are 23 parties here. Several of those, 10 of those parties pulled their candidates and endorsed Lula. And 3 endorsed Bolsonaro. The rest stayed in the race. And I think there were some that pulled some votes away.
Now in Brazil, voting is mandatory, isn't it? It's a little bit different than the United States.
Yeah,
Everybody is required to vote under penalty of getting a fine or something like that. How does that work exactly?
well, it's set up around religion. You go to church on Sunday morning early, and then you go vote. And then the polls close around 5:30, and by 9 o'clock the results are in. It's all done electronically, and the voting machines are not connected to the internet, so they can't be hacked from the outside. Um, so it's a very interesting system. They did fine people until a year ago. The legislature lifted the fine. The fine was 2 real, which is nothing, but it was just the idea of forcing people in. But the participation was like 97% of the voters voted, and there was a
Wow, 97%. That's really huge. Now, I understand that the candidate who ran with Lula, that was part of this left center coalition, had ran against him before, and he comes from a centrist party. Is that correct?
yes, and in the selection, his centrist party lost like 20 seats in the state in the federal Congress.
And the Communist Party of Brazil was part of that coalition.
Oh
Did
yeah,
they win seats? How did they fare? How did our sister party fare?
we we picked up a couple of seats. I'm going through to analyzing the winners and losers because it's going to be a close with the coalition. It's going to be close in the Congress, so it's going to be like Biden is having with a narrow victory there. I
Hmm.
think, but Lula's pretty good. He he's damn good negotiator, and I think that because of the coalition he put together, and I think because of his skills from the trade unions, he'll be able to get a victory. But it may take like the first year of his administration to do that. But
We'd
he has a
like to
lot of.
invite we'd like to invite Rosanna and Anita to ask a question. But while they're thinking about it, I'm just wondering, Gary, what kind of impact will the center forces have on the ability of the Lula government to enact reforms that will benefit the working class and people? Because your comment about the closeness is of the balance of forces in the country is a concern. No.
No, it is a very big concern. In fact, the transition team met yesterday and is starting to meet to make the transition with the incumbent administration. I'm sure, and I don't know this for a fact, but I am sure, knowing Lula, he is working on that coalition in the Congress to strengthen it. He has a lot of power to order things. For instance, when he was elected the first time, he canceled the very first act right after he took the oath was he canceled an order for 60 jet planes, took the money and put it into a fund to feed hungry people.
Money for jobs, not for war. That's one of the battle cries of
Yeah.
our movement. But what about the danger from the right? You know, there was a concern that Bolsonaro was going to do a Trump and refuse to give up office. And you sent me a note the other day that said that the truckers were blocking the roads and impeding traffic and preventing people from going. Is that still going on?
It ended last night at the request of the federal government. Um, Bolsonaro did not make a comment, but his spokesperson contacted the federal military police and ordered them to clear the highways. And so, at least in our area, in the Valley of Steel, the highways are cleared. I don't know about Sao Paulo. There have been some reactions because in some states they moved the trucks, but they didn't move the people. They moved the people to the side of the road so they could still demonstrate. So it's confusing. I mean, we only have 27 states, but there's a lot of highway.
I can
Why do you
imagine.
think? Why do you think they immediately asked for the trucks? To remove the trucks and essentially end the attempt to demonstrate against the elections.
Well,
What was the motivator?
I think the motivation was the feeling that they had a victory, but I mean, Bolsonaro's party picked up a lot of seats. It's sort of like the fascist party in Paris, in France. They picked up seats this time. Um, what's his name? Steve Bannon has been traveling the world promoting this, and he spent a lot of time with Bolsonaro the last 2 years plotting it. And Bolsonaro has been following the manual laid out by Trump step by step, right behind him. Um, the demonstration was stopped basically because business in this country decided they want to move their products. And so it was their push to the governors and to the police to clear that highway, get people moving because we cannot tolerate this. Um, PT and the rest of the parties reported it, but nobody asked for it to end. They wanted to play it out.
Mm.
Uh, The
When
fear,
you say PT, you're talking about the Workers' Party,
the
right?
Workers'
That's
Party,
Lula's party.
Lula's party, um, and our party too. I mean, the three parties that began at the very beginning of Lula's campaign was the PCWB and the Green Party. And you remember 4 years ago, PCWB had the vice president's position, which I was impressed that 45% of the country voted for a communist. Coming from the US, I think that's a pretty good deal.
Absolutely, that's a damn good percentage. In some places, that would win you the election,
Yeah.
kind of depending on the system of voting. Well, Gary, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I imagine, Rosanna, that when you were in Havana at the International Conference of the Communist and Workers' Party, that there was a excitement was in the air about the potential for a victory in Brazil. But I think that the election took place on Sunday as you were returning. Isn't that the case?
Yes, yes, that was the case. I was waiting in the airport and we were starting to see the returns. The very first returns were showing that Bolsonaro was winning, but this was, a short percentage of the vote. So I was happy to hear that once I landed here, to hear that Lula had won.
So you landed here and you were still walking on air. Well,
Yeah.
that's quite an accomplishment. Tell us about the conference. I see you met the president of Cuba during the event, and how many people were? What did he have to say? I know he gave a speech, and how were you received? And just give us some impressions about the your stay.
Well, it's the International Meeting of Communist and Workers' Parties, and we meet every year, and it consists of parties, Marxist-Leninist parties, and workers' parties throughout the world, and we sort of share some of the things that are happening in our country, some of the concerns, and we try to come out with a statement, a unifying statement, which we did, um, mostly declaring we're anti-imperialist. We're going to work towards uh, anti-imperialist issues. The U.S., of course, was not the number one, is the number one imperialist country that goes around the world and thinks that it can dictate everybody else's going on in their country. Um, there was 60 countries represented. Not all countries are able to attend because some of them are under financial restraints and things like that, or they're busy with whatever issues are going on. Uh, we did get to meet the president of Cuba. He talked about the different things that are happening in Cuba, what happened during the COVID. Their economy, of course, has suffered quite a bit, even more so than before. Um, but they waged a campaign to say, we've got to join together and figure this out together, work together, maintain the unity, and also try to focus the plans with the youth in mind, because many of the youth have not experienced the revolution as others have, and so they're receiving a lot of anti-Cuba propaganda, uh, um, kind of pointing that the revolution was that Cuba was better before the revolution and things like that. It's all, once again, it's that battle of ideas. Um, so the meeting ended with us unifying against the things that we have in common. We don't all agree on certain issues, but we did agree that we wanted to fight with on those issues that we do have in common, and we can discuss the other ones out throughout the course of the year and maybe the following year.
Good morning, Scott. Welcome to the program. We're happy to see you. You
Good
look
morning.
very
Good to be
dapper
here.
and clean this morning. Great, nice nice shave and all of that. Well, one of the things that was prominent at the Indian Party Congress that Scott was at was the right wing fascist danger, Rosanna. And I'm wondering, was there a kind of focus on that at the world meeting? Did because I know it's a problem in
Yes.
India, it's a problem in Europe, it was a problem. Well, it remains a problem as we heard from Gary in Brazil. Was that one of the focuses of the meeting?
Yes. I mean, definitely several parties refer to it. And those, you can read those speeches of the different parties, including ours, at the solidnet.org website. But definitely, the fascist trend, the concerns, the struggle against it, were all discussed there.
That's SolidNet, SOLID net.org. You can go there and read our speeches and the speeches of the other parties who were present. And I think that would be an interesting read for all concerned. And then
I do
another
want to,
issue,
I'm sorry,
go on.
go ahead. No, I just wanted to also mention that before the meeting started, the day before the meeting started, they took us on a tour of the Fidel Castro Center, which is the only one that they will name after Fidel Castro, which essentially it outlines his history, very interactive, and it's going to go live November 25th for anyone who's interested. It's very impressive. It's very high tech design, and then also they took us to the biotech, biomedical and technological engineering center. And I'm sorry, I probably messed up those words, but the essence of it is that's where the laboratory where they created the vaccine, the COVID vaccine, because they had so much difficulties trying to obtain vaccine from other countries. They created their own, which is now in a nasal spray. And they also showed us the different kinds of medications that they are coming up with. Lung cancer fighting medication that attacks the cancer, but not the rest of the body. Medication that prevents ulcers from forming in the feet of people with diabetes. An anti-inflammatory medication that is in the works. And I was so impressed and at awe of the different medications that are being produced. That are, very very advanced, and this blockade is denying the world of these medications. And I really sat there, and I remembered my niece and my brother-in-law. Had they had these medications, they would have been alive today. So it was really something that just was something we have to do to end this blockade, not just for the people of Cuba, but for the people of the world, because there's just such an advancement going on there, in spite of the blockade. Very impressive.
The blockade is criminal, the blockade is inhuman, the blockade is against progress, and it must be ended. And whatever the case, whoever wins on Tuesday, we have to continue to push for that demand. There was a vote in the
Exactly.
UN, I believe, this
There,
week with respect to the blockade.
there
Does
was.
anybody? How did that go,
I think there were
Anita?
maybe two or three people that didn't join in on that vote. Almost everyone in the world, and save Israel and the United States, and I think Brazil also abstained from that. But I also want to mention on that same solidnet.org site, there is a document, not only the document that's the Cuba statement, I mean, conference statement, the final declaration, but there's also a plan of action, which is really an inspiring document. And I mean, to have a plan of action, you know, drawn up by 60 communist parties or communist parties from 60 countries around the world is really something that we can all have a look at and see where we plug into that. They have a few things like International Day of Peace, International Day of Solidarity with Puerto Rico, International Youth Day. And these are kind of things that we could celebrate here and know that we're celebrating them with communist and workers' parties all around the world.
The
And that's
unity of
more
action.
than the six. Those are more than the 60 countries, because it was a plan of work that was created with all the countries that belong, which is I think close to 190 countries.
Wow.
The unity of action was a powerful material force on this planet for almost 80 years. You know, it helped lead to the fight to the defeat of fascism. Fascism would not have been defeated in World War II, Scott, had it not been for the unity of our movement. It led to the freedom of Nelson Mandela, joint action of the initiative of the Communist parties, led to the freedom of our own Angela Davis. Had it not been for that international solidarity, you know, we might have lost. She might have been executed, and on and on and on. And after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the Eastern European countries, that unity waned. Joint action subsided. And now, given the level of the fascist danger and the exploitation around the world and the environmental danger, that joint unity is needed now more than ever. I suppose you heard a lot about that in India while you were at the Indian Party Congress, Scott.
Absolutely. Unity on every level, in fact, from unity within the Communist Party of India, unity within the communist movement, because there are multiple communist parties there, unity between the left and the broader coalition needed to fight Modi's forces, but also unity on the world level in the struggle against imperialism and war. So yeah, unity is the great that's what makes the working class powerful. Capitalists, billionaires, they're powerful as individuals. They have the property to, you know, work their will on the world as individuals. That's not how the working class does it. That's not how oppressed peoples do it. Our strength comes from unity, the ability to organize and, you know, figure out how to put our differences aside, unite around um, what we have in common, as Rosanna said, and move forward toward liberation.
You know, we're so happy to hear that the Communist Party of Cuba played a unique role in putting together that international statement of the parties. And that's kind of the role that the Cubans and others have traditionally played, given their
Yes,
status in the international communist and workers movement. And that they weren't always able to come together on a joint statement. There were differences
that's
on
right.
this or that or the other, and there still are with respect to the war in Ukraine and so on, who is responsible and all of that. But they were able to find a common platform this time around, and we hope that that plan of action will be implemented, and we pledge to do our part. And we got a big job to do in this country because, as you know, the election is coming up. And one of the indications of that job, Anita, was the debate
Mm-hmm.
taking place in the Supreme Court this week around affirmative action. Uh, and it seems that the conservative, I even hate calling them jokers, conservative, that right wing, extreme right majority are anti affirmative action, anti taking into account race as one among several factors in admitting Black and Latino students. It's likely to have a big impact on college admissions. No?
That's right. There's the one person who has launched these two attacks. Actually, he's backed up by think tanks, conservative politicians, lawyers. Lots of right wing forces have joined in this fight, and they took on University of North Carolina on constitutional grounds and Harvard University on statutory grounds because The first one is a public institution, the second one is private. So this man hopes to end, or this organization hopes to end affirmative action across the board at private and public colleges. And it really comes down to an argument about the nature of the 14th and 15th Amendments to the Constitution, whether there's race blindness in there. And of course, there isn't race blindness in there. There was some very deliberate attention to race. It will be a big problem, I think, to continue to diversify college classes, and I think that's what these forces have in mind. They would like those kind of elite institutions to be reserved just for people like them, and people from the ruling class, the children of the ruling class, and they don't want to be they don't want to have any competition from people who may not have had the privileges that they had conferred on their own children in the college admissions process.
The one thing I've never understood, Scott, is that they already have preferential treatment for students going to different universities. If you are an alumni of a school, you get your children get preferential treatment. I mean,
Yeah,
doesn't that happen all over the place? So I mean, why are they picking on?
certainly in the schools that I've been affiliated with, been familiar with. Yeah, legacy admissions are the if your parents were enrolled at the school, one of your parents or a relative some other way was a student there, they can give you a certain little bump in. There are a lot of things that play into the admissions process and the scoring of candidates, and that's one of them. What this affirmative action case is really just the open defense of white supremacy. This is the most reactionary section of the capitalist class saying we need to preserve institutional racism and white supremacy at all costs. And it's no surprise because capitalism, the survival of capitalism, depends on the maintenance of white supremacy along with other forms of oppression. So this is, you know, so for anybody who has even ventured to think for a second that the fight against racism or the fight against sexism or other forms of oppression is some minor thing that can be left for later, this is the proof that it's not the case. This is a case. This is a situation where the capitalist class is attempting to preserve the base of its power at all costs.
And Rosanna, this is why Tuesday's election is so darn important. Because the only way, the only mechanism, the only instrument for changing out the decision, altering of the Supreme Court is the Congress. That's the case with the abortion ban now, and it's going to be the case with respect to college admissions, and that's why
And
we
yeah.
go on.
Yeah, and in many other cases, even on the local level, on state level, if we don't vote, it has an impact. It really has. We are seeing the impact right now, and I think it's we've got to get out to vote because it does impact. It may not impact some of us directly, but it impacts others. And as communists, that's what we're talking about, is the impact not just on us but on others, and others that don't have the voice, others that don't have the ability to vote, aren't able to vote. So I think we have to think in those terms and understand that voting and legislators, they're the ones who make the laws. They're the ones who have the impact. They're the ones who are making these changes, and so we have to participate in it. I wish it was mandatory like in Brazil.
Yeah, me too. It would be a whole different ball game if that was the case. But Until that happens, we got to fight for DC to get statehood, because if Washington, D.C. gets statehood, that'll change the balance of power in Congress, you know. And we've got to work for greater electoral reform. And that reform is going to have to come from pushing on the streets and pushing in the workplaces, you know, and pushing on the campuses, because there is a fascist danger, you know. There is a fascist, and it's real, you know. And I don't think people really understand what fascism consists in, you know. Fascism is mass murder. Fascism is genocide. Fascism is organized industrial torture, you know, on a broad scale. Fascism is the concentration camps. Fascism was the disappeared in Argentina. Remember that? Thousands of people murdered by the military junta. Fascism is what happened in that stadium in Chile when hundreds were massacred. And after that, they took the communists and the socialists and the Democrats, the revolutionary Democrats with a small d. And I'm one of them, by the way, a revolutionary working class Democrat. And they threw them out the windows. Helicopters. That's what fascism is. Fascism is going back to your home country and looking for your family and your cousins and your nephews and second cousins, third cousins, gone, murdered in the gas chambers. That's what fascism is, you know. And by the way, some people are saying that the Democrats are soft fascists. That's a contradiction in terms, you know. Fascism is hard. Fascism is not covert, it's open, terroristic dictatorship. That's the danger that, and when those Nazis marched in Charlottesville talking about they will not replace us, think about what's behind that concept: murder, genocide, concentration camps. You know, no, a friend of mine from Portugal, from the Communist Party of Portugal, the other day, after the victory of Lula, he said, "Thank you. We dodged a bullet." Never underestimate the fascist danger. And they know, because they suffered for what, 70, 80 years under the Salazar and Cateno dictatorships. So, comrades, friends, brothers and sisters, siblings, stay strong, stay safe, stay in the fight. And on Tuesday, what are we going to do, Rosanna?
Vote. Get out the vote.
Anita?
Get out the vote. Exactly.
God, what are we going to do?
Vote
Tuesday?
against fascism. Make sure everybody else does too.
Take care, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Bye.
Do some door knocking. Make
Bye,
some phone
everybody.
calls. Do your job.